Hey, Steve Magnante here at High-Octane Classics in Auburn, Massachusetts with another muscle car walk-around. In this case, the granddaddy of all muscle cars, the Pontiac GTO. Now, we know that the GTO arrived in 1964 and was kind of a rule bender because GM had a mandate that no engines bigger than 327 cubic inches could be built or installed in mid-sized cars. Well, John DeLorean and the merrymakers at Pontiac says, let's put the 389 from the full-size car into the mid-sized Tempest Le Mans platform, and the GTO was born. Very successful package. In fact, it was the blueprint for the rest of Detroit, the Pontiac GTX or the Plymouth GTX, big difference, Ford Fairlane GT, and any number of other cars that were sort of wannabes and follow-alongs, but the GTO did it all first. Now, by 1970, when this one was built, only 43,946 GTOs were built, including a couple of convertibles and a bunch of judges, but that's a total of 43,946, which is about a third or a half of what the big numbers were in the late 60s, early mid-60s. So by this point in time, 1970, the emissions crisis, the fuel economy stuff was starting to hit, and the insurance industry was cracking down on muscle car buyers. And in many cases, if you were under 20, you paid as much for insurance every month as you did for your car payment. So it really kind of put the kibosh on muscle cars like the GTO. Now, the whole thing with the GTO is that this is not a judge. The judge was available in 1969 and 70. And this is not a judge because we see no stripes here over the wheel arches. We see trim rings, and we see body-colored ram air scoops. Of course, on a judge, there'd be no trim rings. The wheels would be painted gold or silver all the way front and back, up to down, and no trim rings on them. And also the hood inserts would be painted black on an actual judge. But this is a regular GTO, and there's nothing wrong with that. And getting back to this engine, we can see right here the word ram air. What does that mean? Well, that means when we open the hood, we'll see a functional cold air system to keep this 400 cubic inch motor fed with cool, dense outside air. The 1970 Pontiac GTO engine list included the standard 400 cube motor with 350 horsepower, the Ram Air 3 with 360 horsepower, and of course the Ram Air 4 366 horsepower, and of course the 310 horsepower 455. That's not what we have here. This is the standard Ram Air 3. Nothing wrong with that. What does Ram Air mean? Well, we saw the hood scoops on this, the little ducts in the top of the hood skin. They feed cool air into the styrofoam or this foam housing here at the air cleaner base, which is steel. And what that does, basically, it admits cool outside air. So the 360 horsepower, 400 cubic inch engine has a better chance at making full power. Keep in mind that underhood temperatures usually are about 25 to 30 degrees higher than outside air temperature because the engine compartment is pretty hot. And if the engine's ingesting air from under the hood, it's not making the full power. So the cold air system, the Ram Air system, helps that motor to be a muscle motor in a muscle car. One thing, too, about 1970, a whole new grille and design of the beak, the nose, urethane, no more hideaway headlight option. That was something you get in 1969 if you wanted it. But here, all of these GTOs and all GTOs had exposed headlights like we see here. The Pontiac beak, the prow, and this is basically a steel bumper with a urethane overlay and pretty durable stuff. The idea here was that it would come back from mild impact with a shopping cart without any damage, although the paint would probably get checked. Still a great look, a very one-piece design on this thing right here. No air conditioning here, which is fine by me. I do see power steering and power disc brakes up front, which was standard equipment on GTO. And a great-looking engine bay. The chrome valve covers are factory stock. The intake manifold is a cast iron factory piece with a quadrijet 4-barrel carburetor, so well restored and accurately detailed under the hood. Let's see what we have for a transmission. Well, that's a nice surprise. The base transmission in the GTO was a 3-speed manual with a floor shifter. But what we have here is the optional $188 4-speed with a Hurst shifter right here. And otherwise, there was also an automatic transmission if you didn't want to shift your own gears. But in this car here, I'm glad to see the 400 Ram Air, the 4-speed transmission. And this is the original numbers matching engine and transmission in this car. It's a numbers matching car. And the VIN starts with 242, which tells it's real Pontiac GTO. Kind of cool to see 140 mile an hour speedometer. That was standard fare on the GTO. And of course, in Chevy land, or in Oldsmobile 442 land, or Buick GS land, these would have had 120 mile an hour speedometer, but only the GTO gave you a 140 number. I wonder how many people tried to get that 140 mile an hour number or not and survived it or didn't. I don't know, but that's the original speedometer and tachometer in this one here. And something kind of cool here is this has an 8-track, Pontiac 8-track cassette player right here. And I love this. Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland. Very cool, great album right there. When I was a kid, I bought this as a record, not as an 8-track, but 8-track technology has come and gone. But again, Jimi Hendrix, Cry of Love, great music from Jimi Hendrix. Moving from inside to the outside of this car, One thing we won't see on a GTO is the Judge-style trunk spoiler, which was standard fare on the Judge, but was not standard on the GTO. But at the rear bumper, we see it's chrome, as it should be, but also below here, the bumper itself has cutouts for the quad-tip dual exhaust system, which is another GTO feature, also seen on GTO Judges, but a very distinctive tail treatment. So if you're driving a Roadrunner or a Mustang Mach 1 or something like that, and one of these in front of you, you don't notice the GTO, the quad tips and cutouts will alert you to the fact there's a 400 cubic inch engine under the hood. And speaking of that hood, there's a Ram Air logo on the hood itself. It's cold air, 360 horsepower, not the base 350 horse motor. Pretty cool. Another non-Judge feature that we see on this one here is the stainless steel trim rings on the 14-inch wheels. On a Judge, there would be no trim ring, just a gray painted 5-spoke wheel. And again, I think Pontiac figured less can be more. And the GTO Judge was meant to be kind of a bare-knuckle street racer. And I guess the trim rings were a little more glitzier than the Pontiac product planners wanted. So if you see trim rings on a GTO, it's not a Judge, but that's okay with me. And one thing too about the GTO is we know that they were built between 1964 and 1974. The 74 was based on the Chevy Nova, although it was kind of cool. It had a 350 cubic inch motor with a shaker, kind of cool, kind of a baby GTO. And of course, the GTO came back in 2004, 5, and 6 as the Holden Monaro with American styling, sort of, an American V8 engines under the hood. So the GTO is gone, but not forgotten. This one here is one of 43,946 GTOs built in 1970. Kind of, the party was peaking, but again, a great car here. Disc brakes, power disc brakes up front, 9-inch drums in the back, safety track, and again, matching numbers, engine and transmission. A rare thing for a 4-speed muscle car to still have its original matching numbers, engine and transmission. So it's a great car. Take a peek at it, learn more on the High Octane Classics website, and check out the photo gallery.